Blog Talk Radio.
Namaste, folks. Welcome to Nature of Reality Radio on March 30th, 2016. This is your host, Andrew Fisher, broadcasting Wednesdays from the suburbs of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to expose the true and false nature of reality for what it is and what it is not. On the show today, Peter Moon, going to be discussing, among other things, mind-blowing revelations about secret space-time projects, which aren't actually secret because people know about them, but they're secret because the people that are behind them don't want a lot of people knowing about them. But, well, you get the idea. A lot of stuff about Montauk time travel, Transylvania series, I see. I'll be talking about that. I'll be using his site as a guide. There is a 516 area code here in the queue. Peter, if that is you, thank you for calling in. I'll get you on at no later than 10 after the hour. First, though, as always, the news courtesy of Alex Jones and Company at InfoWars. First article report, Trump Nazi KKK connections leaked, secrets of Trump phenomenon revealed. Alex Jones examines the media's attempt to label GOP frontrunner Donald Trump as a racist Nazi. Okay, so he's not actually a Nazi or KKK connected. So they're just going to try to put that in a false light. I think that's what is going to be explained here. I haven't had time to look at this, but is Donald Trump in any way connected to the Freemasons, though? Alfred Weber was talking about that in one of his recent interviews. Like his daughter, Donald Trump's daughter, was making what appeared to be Masonic symbols. The Freemasons are not Illuminati, strictly speaking. They have been infiltrated by the Illuminati to a great extent, and like the Freemason founding fathers, they weren't Illuminati, but they were infiltrated by the Bavarian Illuminati, which was formed on May 1st, 1776 by Adam Weishaupt in Bavaria, Germany. And George Washington talked about that, and so that's when things kind of went sour for the Freemasons. But there are plenty of good factions there. Donnie Gilson, one of my previous guests, could tell you that, and maybe if this is true, what Alfred Weber suspects, then maybe Trump is connected to good Freemasons who want to set things straight and overpower the Illuminati. So, well, that's only a hunch, but Trump, he seems like a good guy. Disagree with him on things like waterboarding, eminent domain, some people say, but some say he's a red herring because of the way they portray him diverts attention from so many other things that many would consider more important. The president is just supposed to enact the laws, help enact the laws that have been passed by Congress. Passed by Congress, keyword. President can't be a dictator. Congress gets the final say, even in overriding presidential veto. So, hopefully Trump understands that. Other than that, well, seems like a good guy, workaholic, not powerly connected. All right, next article. D.C. Madam Lawyer says client call record will influence election. Deborah Palfrey catered to Washington politicians and government insiders. Montgomery Blair Sibley has threatened to release phone records he claims will throw a kink in the presidential election. The disbarred attorney has threatened to release one or more names on the steps of the Supreme Court, which still, I don't think has had a judge replaced. Antonin Scalia, who was murdered by the Illuminati, died of natural causes. My ass, he was assassinated because he wasn't going along with the dark side anymore. All right, this whole D.C. Madam thing, I'm not really an expert on it. I know she was murdered because she tried to blow the whistle on things, and Alex Jones warned her, listen, you're in deep trouble, and she decided, I think, to ignore him, and when she talked to him on his show, and next thing she was dead. So, but hey, if it can throw a kink in the presidential election, I don't know what that exactly means. If I were forced to, I'm not going to vote. I never vote, but I realize there's a lot of voter fraud that can go on, so it's not really worth it as far as I'm concerned, but if I had to choose between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, well, Hillary Clinton, Illuminati Grand Dame, and David Icke's Revelations of a Mother Goddess documentary, Arizona Wilder said, quote, I saw Hillary Clinton before I knew she was Hillary Clinton. And she was talking about Illuminati satanic ceremonies where political and corporate leaders would shapeshift into reptilian aliens. So, okay, if I had to choose, I guess I would choose Donald Trump, knowing that Hillary is literally not of this earth. So, or make it whatever you will, but I kind of diverted from the whole D.C. Madam thing here, but again, I'm not an expert on that, so check out this article yourself. Next article, Ted Nugent says the global elite hate Donald Trump, and I like it. Sounds like the kind of president the U.S. needs. Musician and political activist Ted Nugent said he's impressed by both GOP candidates Ted Cruz. Oh, by the way, Ted Cruz, I'll get to him in a second, and Donald Trump. But in a recent Facebook post, the Cat Scratch Fever songwriter highlights why he thinks Trump is pissing off all the right people. The power elites he's pissing off because he's not working for them. If he used to be a member of the Illuminati, he's not anymore. So But Ted Cruz, we found out that if he was on the good side, he's joining the dark side. He's Goldman Sachs backed and is definitely supporting the globalists now. And I mean, I saw him at the Liberty Political Action Conference speak, and he acted like he supported gun rights. But at the end of his this is the 2014 Liberty Political Action Conference where I saw Ted Cruz speak, and he talked about how he does support gun rights, but at the end of his speech he said, I believe national security is paramount for America, and I believe that we got to do what we can to stop ISIS and Al-Qaeda. He acted like he didn't understand that ISIS and Al-Qaeda are controlled and funded by the U.S. government in many regards, and didn't understand that national security and also public safety are brainwashing terms and phrases used to scare people into giving up liberty for security. So, I mean, maybe at that point he was turning to the dark side, or if he was dark side all along and faking some of the things like his gun rights thing, I don't know, but he's clearly not worth supporting, and Ted Nugent, hopefully he'll wake up to that. But it's well, a lot of people like the fact, and I like it too, that the global elite hate Donald Trump and he's overpowering them. So that shows that the global elite are losing power. Great. So next, a lot of Trump articles here. Trump, Matt Drudge of the Drudge Report says Trump is a fantastic guy. GOP frontrunner speaks highly of media pioneer. Donald Trump had nice things to say about Matt Drudge of the Drudge Report during a speech near Green Bay, Wisconsin. Well, a little bit of a conflict of interest here with this post because Matt Drudge and Alex Jones they don't really know each other, but they like share a lot of articles. The Drudge Report like puts InfoWars up top, like he says this Alex Jones guy, he deserves to be the #1 media reporter because he exposes corruption and he tells the truth, even though he might want publicity from fear-mongering and all that. But as one of my previous guests, John Nicholson, said, but still the truth is important here. And well, Trump, just don't become like the next Benedict Arnold. All right, next article. Cuban internet censorship is a good thing, according to The Nation. A venerable progressive magazine argues in favor of a repressive regime because it beats corporate control. What's worse than living under a repressive regime that tightly controls your ability to gauge the rest of the world, censors anything remotely critical of the government, and doles out broadband internet access to privileged individuals? Well, Google is worse, of course. Yes, to hear that some magazine would say that censorship of the internet is a good thing and maybe other countries like America should take it up, are they really that desperate for power, the global elite, now that they have to resort to these obvious, ridiculous measures? Well, some people in the general public are stupid enough to fall for this, but to say that Cuban internet censorship is a good thing after Americans have been taught for years to be against Cuban communism and all, and well, this should wake up people exponentially, but people already are waking up exponentially, so it's only a matter of time, folks. I'm trying to be positive with these negative news articles. Next article, exclusive. Most Americans support torture against terror suspects. Poll has forcefully injected the issue of whether terrorism suspects should be tortured into the election campaign. Nearly 2/3 of Americans believe torture can be justified to extract information from suspected terrorists. According to a Reuters poll, a level of support similar to that seen in countries like Nigeria where militant attacks are common. So Americans want to be slaves. They think it's okay to give up liberty for security and scare people and intimidate people into confessing against themselves, clear violation of the right to not-incriminate oneself and be treated like you're innocent until proven guilty. But the globalists don't want us to have those rights, So Americans, please realize that you're basically saying I want to be a slave in this poll. A next article. Landmark test links toxic insecticide dust to beehive damage. To Minnesota beekeepers see necessary compensation. Beekeepers have instinctively known this all along, but a new landmark study has linked insecticide dust to damaged beehives. This is a sad but welcome confirmation of what beekeepers in Minnesota have been trying to tell the world for years now. Yes, folks, you don't want to lose the bees. They are key to a human-bee symbiotic relationship, for lack of a better phrase, on planet Earth is key for nature to live in harmony. All right, next article. National Farmers Union calls for halt of genetically modified alfalfa seed sales. GM contamination makes non-GM alfalfa of no market value. Yes, so people wake up to the fact that GM food is bad for you. I'm going to the march against Monsanto, which is in about a month from now, so hope people can join in their respective towns that march against Monsanto and tell people GMO is bad. Joe Biden said Donald Trump makes me sad. When I listen to some of the stuff Donald Trump says, it just makes me sad. Yes, another way to demonize Trump and make him lose popularity and also use him as a red herring. And also, Joe Biden's an idiot. Next article, Obama blames media for the rise of Trump. President of the United States lectures media while he runs one of the most deceptive administrations in U.S. history. Yes, media, please wake up. Please stop working for the government, the corporations, and start exposing the government corporations. Don't give in to their intimidation and fear, and act like you understand you have freedom of the press. So, all right, that's enough of that. Nobody in the chat room yet, but I'm already 30 seconds behind schedule. So, area code 516, is this Peter Moon?
Yes.
I'm glad to have you on the air. All right, I did actually look at those videos that you sent me in that email, the time travel ones. I didn't purchase the ones I would have to purchase, but I guess
no, you don't have to purchase them. They are free.
Well, after the there's like a few other ones that you can listen for only like the first 53 seconds, and then I think.
No. I don't know what you got to. There are 7 videos. Are we on the air?
Yes.
Yes, there are 7 videos. You can find the link at digitalmontauk.com, and all you have to do is sign in with your email. And there's 7 videos that are accessible for free to anyone, and it's Time Travel Theory Explained. There's nothing even available for purchase. There will be some additional videos in the relatively near future that will be accessible with a signing up for a website subscription. But the 7 videos up there are free, and they will be for a indefinite amount of time. Okay. And there's no 53 seconds. They're all free.
Okay, I must have missed something there. Okay, but well, before we get into the science and all that, I'd like you to introduce yourself. I found out about you from that interview you did with Andrew Bartzis before he did that time travel series. I haven't listened to any of that, but I am familiar with time travel and government secrets behind it because I had Andrew Bashago on my show. Some people like Douglas Dietrich would suspect Andrew Bashago is under mind control, but, I really don't think that that's right. I think he's honest. But we'll get to that later on. But this is about you first. I want to know who you are. The audience wants to know who you are. What specifically about the secret space-time projects do you reveal to not make them secret anymore? And aside from what the government is hiding, what other things in terms of science can you tell us and talk to us about in this interview? So let's set the stage by you introducing yourself, and also tell us where people can find you.
Okay, well, my name is Peter Moon, and I am an author/publisher, and I got involved in the time travel business in 1990 when I met my co-author, Preston Nichols, who was a scientist who worked in secret government projects. And that was my introduction into a connection to the secret government, was Preston Nichols and him beginning to divulge his association with a secret project that occurred in Camp Hero, which is an Air Force Station located at the extreme eastern end of Long Island, Montauk Point, New York. And I met him in 1990. I had a background in, originally I grew up and got involved in Scientology, which gave me an understanding of the human mind and how people interfaced with the government on deeper levels. And as well as when I left Scientology in 1983, came to Long Island, where I eventually worked in the advertising and design business. And this is when I met Preston Nichols. And so I listened to his wild stories and said, I'd like to, read a book on this if there is anything on it. And no, there wasn't. And eventually I contracted with him to write a book, and this became the Montauk Project's Experiments in Time. So that's how I got involved in this weird or unusual subject of time travel. And after that book was written, I sought to verify his claims to the best of my ability. And there was a data trail that had been scorched, had been hidden, and many times these trails were deliberately shredded or deliberately obfuscated. And I began to find experiences of coincidence or synchronicity, and this became the hallmark of my investigations, coincident, evidence by coincidence. And this has followed into some very intriguing trails in a whole series of books. My publishing company is Sky Books, and skybooks.usa.com. You can find the books there. My regular website for information is digitalmontauk.com, and I'm building a whole new website off of that, which is an accessory to that, which is going to have which I've just released 7 videos on the subject of time travel theory explained, based on the work of Dr. David Anderson, who came later into my life in 1999 when he read the Montauk Project, and he is involved in current experiments in time at some of the most intriguing levels of what you might call the military-industrial complex. That's a brief introduction to who I am.
All right, thank you very much. And this whole thing about Scientology, I think we might as well get this out of the way. L. Ron Hubbard, founder of all that, it's been said Scientology was actually created as a bit of a, how should I say this, a philosophy or religion to suppress the consciousness of people, in the same way New Age was created to suppress the consciousness of people that found out religion was designed to do just that. But then again, there's a lot of good people that would say I'm a Scientologist and I'm a good person, so I don't see anything wrong with this, just like any religion for that matter.
Well, let me say something about not only Scientology, but this would apply to some of the secret societies you were referring to in the broadcast you were doing prior to taking me on here. Millions, literally millions upon millions of people have been involved with Scientology in one form or another since it formed in the early 1950s. And the same can be said with the Illuminati or the Freemasons. They have an even longer history. For every person that was involved with them, there are divergent viewpoints. And to have a collective viewpoint on any of these things, it doesn't quite work in the end, because you can have, like I grew up in the 60s and when, most of the kids of my age wore long hair and were inclined to looking like hippies. That was consensus reality. Hippies were good to the youth, not all the youth, but and then they grow up and hippies aren't so good. So it's like time is a senior factor to all of these opinions that people lay on groups. Scientology was very progressive in many respects when I was involved in it. It since has polarized in a different direction. And even within that different direction, you'll find people who have upbeat experiences with it. So it's hard to label something. What's significant about my involvement with it is that I worked in the personal office of L. Ron Hubbard, and Hubbard was a very intriguing character and a highly competent character in many respects, because he worked at the highest levels of psychological operations in the U.S. Navy, and he worked with the protege of Sigmund Freud, Commander John Thompson of the U.S. Navy, and he learned psychoanalytic techniques as a young boy. He was also involved in high levels of military intelligence. And so you see what Hubbard did, whether people like him or don't like him, he was able to do something that psychiatrists and intelligence officers can't do. Your average run-of-the-mill intelligence officer, psychiatrist. He was able to create an entire psychotherapy with a huge following. He was also able to create an intelligence network that was bigger than most countries. This was within the confines of Scientology. So he was a very capable person, and of course, in my case, Scientology did not suppress my consciousness. No, it opened my consciousness. It gave me wonderful experiences. Now, I understand that there are thousands upon thousands of horror stories of people who have come close. It's like those poor sailors involved in the Philadelphia experiment who came too close to the space-time field and they got scorched. People do get scorched when different levels of consciousness come into play. And, so yes, there are many divergent viewpoints. And anyway, that's what I have to say about that.
Thank you, and we'll get to the Philadelphia experiment in a little bit in greater detail. But Montauk, a lot of this would say talk about Montauk. You're preaching to the choir. I know all about this because I hear it all the time from multiple sources. But then again, it seems like maybe there's other things behind Montauk that we don't know about. Many people have heard of the Montauk monster, which some say is a reptilian alien, others say is a mutated dog that could have been created on the Plum Island Bioterror Lab. But that's what the Conspiracy with Jesse Ventura episode talked about. But there's also the Montauk chair. I did put a logo of that on the flashing pictures for this show on Blog Talk. So the who, what, when, where, why, and how of Montauk, you got the floor. Enlighten those who are not familiar with this.
Well, the Montauk Project is, according to, which all the available data is seated in the Philadelphia experiment, 1943. The Montauk Project climaxed in 83. The Philadelphia experiment is 1943. So the Philadelphia experiment, you have to explain the Montauk Project, you have to start with the Philadelphia experiment. Both are experiments in time. When the Philadelphia experiment was when the Navy was seeking to experiment with radar invisibility. And the short story is that they sought to make the USS Eldridge, a destroyer escort, invisible and make it appear invisible on radar screens, like to create stealth. This is the forerunner of the stealth technology. And when they did make it appear invisible, it literally did become invisible, and it was displaced in time. Now, there are many layers. Just like if you were to walk into your Freemasonic lodge, you would find many layers of participation, knowledge, and rank within a Masonic lodge. In the Philadelphia experiment was the same way. On the outside, it was experimenting with radar invisibility. On more inner levels, there were people that knew they were manipulating time, and it's even been hypothesized that they were allowing creatures, forces, flying saucers, if you will, from other dimensions to enter this realm. Of course, this is speculative, but there are different layers to almost everything when you come to secret projects, which is sort of what we're talking about. So the Philadelphia experiment, on what happened was a lot of things went wrong in the experiment, because when people were exposed to these, you can only call them time warp fields, and their minds began to suffer. Sometimes their bodies would suffer, and sometimes there are reports of them being embedded into the bulkheads of the ship. Now, after this experiment, which was a disaster on the human level, was done, it was left alone for the most part, and the war was pursued by other means. The wrapping up of the war was pursued by other means. But they began to study. They took the sailors and they took them to at least two different convalescent hospitals, one of which was in Virginia, which would later become near the CIA, where that would be established. And the other one was to Camp Upton in Long Island. Camp Upton was a World War I camp, and it's in Yaphank, Long Island. And it's a very interesting association with where they took these sailors, because Yaphank was where they had the biggest conclave of Nazis outside of Germany, in a place called German Gardens. And there were all of these streets named after all the top Nazis, like Hitler. There was Adolf Hitler Boulevard. And Suffolk County on Long Island has sought to erase, certain people have sought to erase the memory of this by actually taking it out of the history books, or taking it out of the logs, the papers, the filing, the maps of history. But they've never succeeded in doing this. because it is the truth. So you had a Nazi enclave, and this vicinity became the home of Brookhaven Labs, the premier atomic laboratory in the nation in the 1950s. So this became the place where they researched the mind, the human factor study it was called, from the Philadelphia experiment. There were experiments done to, and these are discussed in the book, The Montauk Project Experiments in Time, available at skybooks.usa.com, also available on Kindle, Nook, and iTunes. Now, these studies would link the mind of man with radio frequency, would link it with the early version of the computers. The man who ran the project was John von Neumann, who is credited as being the inventor of the modern computer, at least in America. And John von Neumann was the best mathematician of his day, and he was good at taking mathematics and putting them into nuts and bolts application. So this was the forerunner of the Montauk Project, all of this research that took place at Brookhaven, where they could literally influence a person's mind by radio frequency, and with the use of computers as well to monitor and modulate it. So then all of this research was declared to be unsuitable, not to be done by the Congress in about 1958, and then it was moved in secret out to Montauk Air Force Station, which has a long history of strangeness, and the experiments were sort of melded not only with the previous Nazi research that was done from the captured German documents of World War II and the Joseph Mengele experiments, but with the research that was done by the U.S. Army in something called Project Phoenix, where they were experimenting with sound and manipulating people with sound waves and whatnot. So this was a project that all congealed at Montauk at the end of Long Island and really got going in the 70s. And as they began to play with, experiment with the mind of man, they found out that the mind of man could affect time. And when you would amplify the broadcast, just as you could read the human mind with radio frequency, you could also broadcast what the human mind was thinking with radio frequency. And by amplifying that broadcast, you could affect time. And eventually they were able to create, according to the stories/legends, they could create time portals. And this was what they were doing in the Montauk Project. It was about experiments in time.
Okay, and on that note, well, before we start talking about the science behind how time travel is possible and what kind of technology the government is employing, just want to get this out of the way. I mentioned it earlier that some people think that Andrew Bashago, who I had as a guest on my show, and I do believe he's on, is under some form of mind control, and that raises a whole can of worms in regards to which whistleblowers or public informants are under mind control, and how are they able to think that they're telling the truth to this extent? How good can that mind control possibly be? So this whole idea that he could be under mind control, do you think he is not? And, well, yeah, what's your take on that idea?
Well, number one, I'm not here to place judgment on Andy Basagio, who I've known since the early 2000s. He had, had the rights to a book on Fatima. That's how I met him. And one of my authors, Alexander Bruce, had translated it from Portuguese into English. And I used to talk to Andy way back then. He's a very nice person. He was involved in a project, he said, way back then. And he's dedicated a lot of his time and energy to being, by saying this, and he also has some sort of agenda to get attention for it, to bring it to the forefront. I think it's rather obvious that he was involved in some sort of project, and if and most of these projects are loaded with occultism and mind control. And I know he's trying to recover parts of it. So he doesn't have full recall of everything that happened, and he will admit that. And so it's like anybody I've ever met in time travel projects or these projects are government mind control is a part of the thing. What becomes a little negative, I guess, is when people try and say mind control, so then you dismiss the individual. What you're dealing with these projects, secret project, is post-traumatic stress disorder. And this is how L. Ron Hubbard got in the business of psychology. He was dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder of soldiers and sailors and military people. And this is what the Dianetics was formed on, relieving people's stress disorders, psychological stress disorders. Sometimes it was not involved with war at all. But so people who have been through, like say with the Philadelphia experiment, with all of these things, they are subject, and human beings in general are subject to this. So when people start saying, well, this person's under mind control, this person's under mind control, most of humanity has been under the influence of mind control. It's a question of to what degree, and what is the purpose? You know, what is the purpose of Andy in trying to talk about these things, and what is the purpose of people in trying to either further his cause or negate his cause? It's kind of like he is a character in life, and one of the things is, just as they said about these subjects like Scientology and Freemasonry, there's many divergent opinions. No matter how you sum up a subject, whether it be on something mundane or something exotic, like UFOs or something like this, there's all these divergent viewpoints, and you can't have a uniform, consistent consensus agreement on anything. So Al Bielek is another one who was like Andy in terms of talking about his experiences with the Montauk Project and with the Philadelphia experiment. His stories were more wild than Andy's. You would sometimes find some amazing consistency if you listened to him long enough, but sometimes he sounded like a crazy person or somebody who was lost. But Al Bielek is like part of the iconography of space-time legends and stories, and Andrew has put himself in that category as well. What's important to me in studying these things is that you have a balance of both sides of the brain, the left brain and the right brain. And sometimes people who are advocating endless stories will insult the intellectual side of the brain if you just keep giving too much. It's like too much faith, too much belief. You have to have some faith, waking up, that you'll wake up in the morning and the environment will be relatively the same. You don't know that for a fact when you go to bed. So, you wake up and that the food you're eating isn't poisoned. We don't scientifically analyze our food before we eat it. We trust that what we get at the store is reasonable. So it's the same thing. And if you have too much, if you suspend reality too much, you end up kind of cuckoo, or at least being perceived as such. So, Andy has to be evaluated not only by his own words, but by the filter that the person listening to them chooses to put on. And I think that the most interesting thing I ever saw him come up with was on the Jesse Ventura show about time travel, when he came up with a certain consistency about this location in New Mexico. I forget the specifics, but it did give him a bit of a boost.
Right, and before we get into the government's specific projects, we need to talk about the science behind how time travel is possible. I mean, time travel into the future, the closer and closer you get to the speed of light, then you travel into the future at a faster rate than those that are going slower than you. I'm not going to talk about this. That's your job to do that. I'm going to give you the chance to talk about that. But that's one way. And time travel into the past, I've heard about using cosmic strings, moving one cosmic string past another, but those cosmic strings are huge. It's like almost impossible to do that, one would say. And also wormholes, and problem with time machines, I guess, there is that your time machine can't go far back any more than than the moment it was created, because before then it can't do. So all this stuff about how time travel is possible for the future and the past, the science specifically. You got the floor. Take as much as you need to talk about this.
Well, a lot of those concepts that you mentioned are indeed scientific references or concepts, but there's been much misunderstanding or no understanding, and the only reason on the topic of time travel, and the only reason I've been afforded the opportunity to really appreciate it was through my association with Dr. David Anderson, who came into my life on the anniversary of the Philadelphia experiment, August 1999, when there was a full eclipse going on, and he came into my life, and he was already subscribing to my newsletter, and he was very touched when he read the book, The Montauk Project: Experiments in Time, because at that time he was living on Long Island, and he was creating a time travel museum, and he had his research, the Time Travel Research Center it was called, in Hauppauge, Long Island, and he said that reading that book woke him up as a spiritual being, where he kind of recognized he wasn't just a scientist who'd been in the Air Force. He had a spiritual component to him. So I had just returned from Romania and decided to seek out our monthly meetings that we used to have on Long Island. And he introduced himself. He listened to a lecture by Preston. His understanding of time was different than Preston's. He listened to everything Preston said. He had nothing negative to say about it, except that he was seeking to understand more. And he took me out to lunch and said that he'd just gotten back from Romania and he would like to work with me. It was his idea, not mine. I thought him of importance enough to put on page 3 of my newsletter, whereas almost any mention of him now is front page, because his experiments at that time were rather small in compared to the Montauk Project or in compared to what he's doing now. And I'm not going to go into all the different adventures I've had with him over the years, but in 2008, he invited me to Romania to be participate in a camp over there called Atlanticron. And this was in conjunction with a foundation he set up, the World Genesis Foundation, that he was just setting up at the very day I met him. He was working on setting it up. And then the following year, he lectured on time travel technology. He also invited me to lecture juxtaposed to his discussions on the science of time travel. And he also personally tutored me in a concept called the invariance of the space-time interval, which he also demonstrated publicly to the audience. But the invariance of the space-time interval comes out of the work of John Everett Wheeler, who I think wrote about it. I forget what year he wrote about it, but John Everett Wheeler was a very, impressive, prestigious physicist. He co-author of the Everett Wheeler hypothesis, which talks about multiple universes basically splitting off, an infinite variety of potentialities in existence. But Wheeler had talked about this thing called the invariance of the space-time interval, which is the subject of the first video. I think there's 2 videos on the invariance of the space-time interval, which basically will demonstrate for you that time equates to distance. Time and distance are the same thing. Just like when you see the hand move on a clock, it is moving a distance. When you see a shadow move on a sundial, there's distance involved. So time is moving in more than 3 dimensions, but it's moving in terms of distance, and this can be established mathematically, and this is what those videos do. Now, if you can look up invariance of the space-time interval, you might be able to understand it with Wikipedia. It's going to complicate most individuals. I've reduced the complications into very simple. All you need to do is understand the Pythagorean theorem and maybe watch these videos 2 or 3 times if you didn't get it on the first time to understand that time equates to distance. And because time equates to distance, it can be computed with geometry and algebra. Because when you convert time to distance, all of a sudden now time is accessible and harnessable in terms of just pure mathematics, not necessarily in terms of technology, but mathematics, the foundational mathematics. So I learned this from David. There was another series of subjects which he discussed at that time, which did not sink in totally. I had the same experience in Scientology, 20, 30 years earlier, when I was privy to all of these personal briefings by L. Ron Hubbard that I did not hear personally, but I would get all his notes, and they went in one ear and out the other ear to me at the time because I was relatively new. Years later, I would say, oh, this is what he's talking about, this is what he's talking about. Same thing happened with David. But this was on the subject, those subjects with L. Ron Hubbard, by the way, were on the subject of evil. He was talking about basically evil and how to alleviate evil and how it affected people, which might surprise some people. They consider Scientology to be evil, but he had a whole technology for ridding people of evil and its consequences, what it did to the human body, what it did to the human psychology. But in any case, there's much that's not known about him. And as they say, it's a jaded path in any case. But in the case of David Anderson, he was talking about something called light cones, which is a standard concept in physics that is certainly not appreciated by people outside of physics. I can't speak for how well the world of physics understands light cones, except that they didn't understand it to the point where they could understand the technology that David has developed. But light cones are basically the idea that every point in space is like a pixel on a screen or or in a hologram. A pixel is just an individual spot, and each one of these represent a cone of light. And a cone of light is defined as a cone which goes no further than 45 degrees. And this 45-degree angle it's demonstrated in the videos why. I'm not going to go into that now. It's too hard to describe without a graphic. But every potential beam of light is going to go in a direction forward or backwards, but it's not going to exceed 45 degrees. And so these light cones, so like say your hand is a bunch of light cones, your body, your living room, your studio, wherever you are, everything consists of light cones. When you take these light cones and you can tip them, then you're beginning to literally bend space and time. Now, these are put in the context of cones for a specific reason, which is demonstrated in the videos, but the way you can tip them scientifically is with something called the Tipler cylinder, which is in 1974, I think it was, Frank Tipler stunned the physics world by demonstrating that basically time travel was possible through bending light cones, and time could come back on itself. So this was scientifically proven, but it was completely not feasible because it required too much power. So it was scientifically recognized as theoretically possible, but not in terms of being pragmatic. So those 2 steps were two of David Anderson's foundations, were the Wheeler factor of the invariance of the space-time interval and the Tipler cylinder. Now, as David did his research in the Air Force, where he created a model, a space-time model for correcting the drift of satellites in orbit. He was assigned to do this by the Air Force. he saw that there were potentials in what is known as frame dragging. And frame dragging is a common term in physics that's recognized by every physicist, that when the Earth or any rotating body moves, time and space are actually twisted. So you don't, so it's like you're winding a spring. Now, the amount that time and space is twisted is infinitesimally small. But nevertheless, it does occur. And there is energy that is accessible within this warping of space and time. And this occurs around any rotating body. So this is what actually creates gravity, and you'll find that in the Einstein work, is that it's the rotation that causes gravity to occur. So what you have here is this principle called frame dragging, and the frame dragging, and this was the discovery that David made, is when it would connect with another area of frame dragging, and it could be the Earth itself. He's using, let me just explain a little bit about how his time reactor works. And this is what I'm going into the future videos that have not been released yet, which includes the patent for the time reactor. But he would put a gas into a field, and the gas would be basically ionized, and it would be affected with lasers. Be an electromagnetic field. Gas is inserted into the electromagnetic field that is rotating, and then the whole field is contoured by lasers. And lasers are stimulating this. It's like a plasma generator. And then what happens is there are sensors that are picking up the information. There are beams of energy emitted into the field. They're called interferometers, and they come back, and the sensors are picking up what the field is doing, and then they're going fed into a control system that is monitoring the lasers to contour it, and basically to get it to rotate and create a frame dragging effect. And this frame dragging effect will be linked with another frame dragging effect, whether it be the Earth or some aspect of rotation, and that creates something called space-time motive force. And there are two videos which are available on YouTube now, harvesting, I think they're called Harvesting Energy with Space-Time Motive Force, David Anderson. You put those words in and you'll find them. And they explain how you can tap the energy of the Earth to solve all the world's energy problems. And this is a potential. Now, all of this energy creates the potential to literally warp space and time. And the space and time, what happens is when these light cones are tipped, and I really wish I could have graphics here. This is what the videos are for, because they show it. When these light cones are tipped consistently and repeatedly, they will form a curve. And this is called a closed time light curve. And it is thought incorrectly by Dr. Ronald Mallet of the University of Connecticut that you can only go back to the beginning of the time machine. This is naive and not true. You can potentially, scientifically, you can go anywhere. And what I learned in studying this was the slower you create the time field, the slower it goes, the farther into the future you will go. The faster you create it, the further into the past you will go. So these are just a few of the foundational points. And I want to encourage people to go to my website, digitalmontauk.com, and you'll see the link where you can, all you have to do is enter your email address, and you'll be able to access these videos and go to the store. You go to the link, it says store, and you don't have to buy anything. The store is free. There'll be later things you can buy on the store or access, but right now those 7 videos are for free, and you can understand all of this. It's called Time Travel Theory Explained. And then I will be into a subscriber website. Initially, I'll be putting 2 videos on the time reactor. One will show the patent, which is also in my book, The White Bat, my most recent book, The White Bat. But you will also see I haven't finished the video yet, but it's an explanation of the time reactor. And all of those will eventually be released to the public at some point, just broad and general, but I have to get a certain amount for the website before I can release those to make it viable on an economic basis. But right now, all these 7 videos are free. DigitalMontauk.com will show you how to link it up.
Thank you. And just so you know, we'll be taking calls if there are any. Well, there is a call. Area code 402 will be first up at 7:15 p.m. Eastern, which is in 25 minutes from now. If anyone wants to call in, the number is 646-478-4747. So now that we've gotten the science out of the way there, in regards to what kind of technology the government is using, well, first of all, once again, there's something else about the science that we need to address before we get into that. Paradoxes. I talked about timelines and the possibility of paradoxes when I did a one-on-one with George Kavasilis way back in the day, and he explained that when you go back in time and, like, hypothetically kill your grandfather, to use the grandfather paradox thing, you will have simply created another timeline which is independent of the timeline you originally came from, so you wouldn't vanish out of existence when you kill your grandfather. Now, the problem that I saw with that was that it would suggest that we don't have to worry about our governments or the New World Order going back in time to do something to further their agenda, because it would suggest that if they go back in time and do whatever it is that they want to do to further their agenda, they're just going to create another timeline which is independent of the timeline that we are in, which is the one we originally came from. Now, Alfred Weber, when I interviewed him, talked about how Andrew Basiago explained to him that you should think of timelines as being like lanes on a freeway and cars as being the events on the timeline, and a car moving from one lane to another and affecting the flow of traffic is analogous to moving events from one timeline to another, and you affect the flow of events in both the one that the event entered into and the one that the event originally left from. And that is how it would, you have to understand how that works in order to understand how you can go back in time and manipulate things in the timeline from which you originally came from. And then it was at that point when Andrew Basiago decided to interrupt me, and he said, well, thank you for explaining all that, but I'll take over from here. And then he got into his whole talk about the science behind what the government is doing to look into the future and also manipulate timelines, looking into the past and all that stuff. So the science behind how to avoid paradoxes and moving events from one timeline into another, and then the science behind what technology the government is using. You got the floor. If you have to go longer than 7:15,
what is the question?
The question. I'm sorry for my little talking too much there, but I wanted to get.
No, it's fine for you to talk. I'm just saying, what do you want me to say?
Well, the science behind how paradoxes can be avoided and how timeline events can be moved from one timeline to another. And we'll start off with that, and then the government.
Well, I would defer to David Anderson, who says a paradox is where our mind bumps into something that we do not understand. And so, what appears to a paradox to us, regular citizens, walkabouts on the earth, is, it appears to be a paradox. Just like, if an indigenous person looked into a mirror and wasn't familiar with reflection, he would have a paradox. That's me, but it's not me. So the idea of a new timeline being created, Preston Nichols wrote about this in 1992, and a lot of people have picked up on that. It's a theory. It's basically a theory that there's multiple timelines. This is not a new theory. Parallel universes. I know David Anderson has not encountered parallel universes in his research. Preston Nichols says that the reason for that is that he's not been looking for them, and he's not put himself in a position to where he would or could find them, which might be well to his advantage. But he did do experiments with plants, and when they would go back into time and, say, kill or obliterate a plant in the past, that who had descendants in the present, they'd come back to the present and see those plants, and now they had different DNA. So the timeline was changed irreparably. And that he considers a primary danger, because when you're looking into time, he says, when you look into the time chamber, whatever you want to call it, the time field, you're changing time forever. And this is a very point of high concern with him. So
folks, it appears that Peter Moon has just dropped off. Peter, please try to call in. You have just dropped off the line. I am actually going to try to call his number right now, and if he can hear me, he'll try to call in. But let me try calling this. I'm going to put myself on mute when I... All right, hang on, folks. Folks, I just tried to call the phone. There was no answer. Left a message. I'm going to try to call him again. And then after that, I'm going to have to go on Gmail to see if I can email him. So bear with me, folks. We'll try to get him back. Okay, folks, I just sent him an email, and there is no answer again on the phone. I'm very sorry about this. Hopefully this wasn't some permanent blockage to shut down the show permanently so I can't interview him any further. I don't have any sort of a backup plan here. Area code 402, I'm glad you haven't hung up on the phone here. Apparently you have a very important question. If Peter Moon does not actually call into this show... because, well, he can't find a way to call in, because the fact that he's not answering my phone calls is kind of disturbing here. Wait a minute, there he is. Oh, good. Peter, you're back. Tried to call your cell phone. There was no answer. I was getting kind of concerned there, but
I had the phone ran out of charge, and I had to rearrange the phone lines.
Oh, okay. Well, you're back now, so pick up where you left off if you remember where that was, because
I was talking something about what is called the brothers and sisters experiment of the plants that had been their DNA had changed after their ancestor plant was killed or obliterated. So what I was saying was the timeline was changed irreparably. So if there were alternative timelines, he was not seeing them. And, it's kind of like, you lose your wife and you're very much in love with your wife, and you say, oh, well, yeah, you'll see her in another life. She's doing fine on a parallel timeline. It doesn't quite work that way in the typical human experience. And this is how he's evaluating it from. It's nice to say that all these governments are playing with timelines, and maybe they indeed are. But what is the experience? So the point here is that there are experiments going on. He's very concerned with what he calls creating a moral compass and creating a time council. And this moves us into the politics of time, which is what these other discussions you were alluding to are alluding to themselves, is, our government's manipulating in time. I can only tell you what David Anderson told me, and this was many years ago, and it kind of happened by happenstance when he, we were talking about a Christmas card I got from China, and he says, oh, I got a Christmas card over here from China, and he shows me, and it's from the president of China. And he had all these Christmas cards, which were over a year old, on his mantle. This was at his home in Long Island when he was living there, and it was like they were all from, like, world leaders. I mean, tons of them. I still have some of the envelopes in the papers that I came from him. But they were addressed to the Time Travel Research Center. And he said that he often had occasion to talk to world leaders, and he said that this was by reason of his expertise in nuclear weapons. Like he would be, because he is a physicist, and so, he said that these world leaders were often, by the position they were in, they didn't quite know how they got in the position, and they were trying to do the best they could and be the least destructive that they could. He had a lot of sympathy for them. And in other words, we don't necessarily, we read what the press writes about them, and sometimes they are indeed quite mad in their own right, but we don't necessarily see the dilemmas they have to face, what pressures they are put into, have to put up with, what invisible pressures. So the media, even the alternative media, becomes sort of like feeding jackals in their own right, ready to devour anything, and maybe devour it correctly or maybe not. But in any case, it's very clear from his talk, and this was over 10 years ago, that I think he said was $6 billion a year was being invested in time research, and it's considered the most important part of defense, because if you can change time, you can change so much. And he also said that some people are incredibly myopic and obstinate on the subject. And this is why he has not come forward in all the time in the last 5 years. It's even longer than that. He's been wanting to produce videos. There was a full documentary done on his work that was going to be shown on the Discovery Channel, and that's been buried. This was actually showing the inside of his research center. That's been buried, and he was going to release some videos, he said, last year, and these have not come forth. And in the last conversations I had with him were last year, and he said that, he was more happy to release what little, a little bit through me, because, when he comes out into the forefront, there is a lot of reaction, and it's a lot of immature and inappropriate reaction by both the naysayers and the supporters. So humanity has to grow up and be mature. I mean, humanity is just beginning to deal with the nuclear issue, if it's beginning to deal with it at all. So humanity has a lot of growing pains to do. And this is my observation. This is not what he said to me. So when people can talk all about time travel and what they say might be right, it might be wrong, but, how relevant is it to the next step in your own personal evolution of anything? It just happens to be my job. So I have a specific interest in it. I don't know that everybody needs to be concerned with it. I don't know that they do not. But I will tell you this is very interesting, is when he has these sensors that are basically detecting discharges of space-time motive force within his own configuration, he also has what's called a temporal tremor detector. And these things are set up in satellites in outer space that satellites in orbit that can detect discharges of space-time motive force. So if he sees somebody's doing an experiment in time, whether it be in Japan or China, and he can see these discharges, he can go to them and say, I understand you're doing time experiments. We'd like to talk to you. And of course they're going to listen to him. At least listen to what he has to say, if not more. Because he has a technology which can detect this. So you see the amount of power that this technology implies. And the reason he hasn't been disposed of by the U.S. government, because he's perceived as needed. Now, he does not work for the U.S. government per se. He's an independent contractor. On the other hand, he was in the U.S. Air Force. When you're in the U.S. Air Force, you can be called back to duty at any time, secretly or not. And he also has hobnobbed, for lack of a better word, with some of the highest levels of security clearance and political issues. So basically, it's my personal opinion, based upon knowing him and my observation, that he is dealing with a political level that is beyond the, I guess what you'd say, the paradigm of your average politician, and beyond the paradigm of your average secret government employee. And this is my educated guess, that he is not bound to them. And this fits in with a very interesting legend. Long before I ever met David Anderson, I was driving Al Bielek to Princeton University, where he was trying to seek his records of him having been involved at Princeton University under his alias as Edward Cameron. And on the way there, the year was 1991, and he was telling me everything he could about Montauk, and he was telling me about the Anderson family. And the Anderson family, he said, was a very key family involved with time. He said they were the custodians of time. There was a George Anderson who actually was the gatekeeper at Montauk Point and Camp Hero, and he was the one who let Preston in to access and get all of the government equipment that was unclaimed. And the government basically told him he could get it, but he couldn't get it unless he went onto the base. And this George Anderson character smiled and winked and let him onto the base and told him lots of weird stories. There were the Anderson twins that were the mentors of Al Bielek in Nutley, New Jersey when he grew up. And he told wild stories about the Anderson twins that were involved in, weird off-planetary activity and whatnot. Now, this was a background, and when I would hear this character named David Anderson had a time travel research center, which I learned about in 1998, I said, this is the name Anderson, Time Travel Research Center. This is very strange. Now, David claims no relationship to these Andersons. But what's interesting is that he said that they were the custodians of time, and David is acting as a custodian of time in his own life experience. So in my other work in the occult, I had a lot of synchronicities with the different family names. And these family names, this is a different family, but it shows itself to be consistent with the pattern of, basically DNA. Families are DNA and DNA are families. So this is kind of how it works. It's rather mysterious how all of it works, but we're at the time of information and revelation. And as I speak to you, a lot of the information I'm speaking of is completely novel. It should make heads turn. It would have made heads turn with a lot more attention had it been released 20, 30 years ago, because the science is better than what is in the Montauk Project. And all the stuff that's used is within the language of ordinary physics. It doesn't require quantum tunneling. It doesn't require wormholes. It doesn't require faster than the speed of light. This is all subliminal. You can time travel without exceeding the speed of light. So this is the beauty of what Dr. Anderson has put together. But we live in this sea of information where what the Kardashian family is wearing might be more important than issues that are happening that might concern your own community, your own country, or whatever. So all of this information can be dismissed just by lack of time and attention. And what's this information going to do for me? A great deal of my audience, and I can see what goes on the web, is in the over 50 range. I've lost a lot of my customers over the years because they die. And I came to notoriety when I was about 40 years old with these books, and it's about 23 years ago. And that generation, we have a whole new generation, for better or worse, is not necessarily been my audience per se. So, will they pick up on this? Should they pick on it? Are they capable of picking up on it? You can't, it's easy to judge. I don't even know how old you are, Andrew, but I imagine you're not in your 20s.
I will be 30 on April 7th.
Okay. All right. So you are part of that a generation behind me in terms of age. The younger generation, it's very easy for an older generation to criticize a younger generation. This was done by, the generation older than us. And generations are different. They have different agendas in the scheme of things. They see things differently. And what you lose, where you lose, you gain. And where you gain, you lose. It's an interesting thing. So, part of my role as far as time is explaining things and educating people on time, educating that the first step is educating that time travel is scientifically feasible. And the next question becomes accessible. Is it when it's accessible? But there's something in between feasible and accessible, and that is psychology. And I'll be doing a series of videos on the psychology of space-time. And it begins a lot with when I tell you of the power involved in this technology that I'm describing, where you can go to a government and you can say, you're doing time experiments. How do they perceive you? How do they react to you? And basically they'll come looking for guidance and looking for information because they'll want to know what you know. They're not going to eliminate you. They want to find out what you know. And this has occurred with the Chinese government, who has now officially banned time travel discussions and whatnot, although they did allow the books, the Montauk Project, and at least 3 of the sequels to be translated into Chinese. Well, I don't know if they allowed it, they didn't stop it, because we have at least 4 books translated into Chinese. So these are the issue. It becomes an issue of politics and control and psychology. And this is why I was talking about maturity and understanding. So, I'm just on the other end of the phone telling you these things, and you have, obviously you're trying to educate people on a lot of different subjects. One thing I would say is that a lot of the early stuff I was involved with, the Montauk Project, involved conspiracy and mind control phenomena, and you mentioned Arizona Wilder and all this wild occult manipulation of people, which does occur in varying levels. We never know that it really occurs in the way we're told in these fantastic stories. It may occur exactly the way they say, but these may be screen memories, they may be other things, but we do know that some form of mind control occurs. And often people who come into this field, they hit the mind control and they stop there, and they keep churning it, and they keep trying to prove to others that mind control exists, or may perhaps prove to themselves. And what it does is it creates a perpetual motion of mind control, and pretty soon the mind focuses there and doesn't move on up and over to the next vista. And this is one of the dangers of studying the subject of mind control, studying the subject of time travel, which will always go hand in hand with mind control until it's completely understood, because there are built-in censorships to even thinking about these subjects. I would also add, slowly, but when some of this presentation of what I've given, it was not given by me, it was given by Dr. Anderson, people would recoil, and physicists that would get very angry their emotions would come in. They say, well, if this were all true, I would know how to do it, which is kind of stupid. It's like reading about Tesla and say, well, Tesla, no, he couldn't have done this because if he could do this, I could do it, and I can't do it, so therefore it couldn't exist. This is the level of ego in the common educated PhD. Not all of them, but it's very common. So this is why I'm talking about maturity, emotional maturity, and learning what there is to learn, what is available, and overcoming the greatest enemy any human being will ever have is the ego. And this is one of the problems with people who talk or write about mind control. Their own ego can become wrapped up in what they're saying, and it gets lost. But anyway, that's what I have to say.
Thank you. You're very entitled to your opinion. You get it out very well and should wake a few people up, indeed. And we're going to take calls now. Area code 402 is so far the only person in the queue. So, area code 402, you are on the air. What's your name? Where you're from? What's your question?
My name is Karen. Currently, I live in New Mexico, which is interesting that Mr. Anderson is in New Mexico now.
Yes. Hi, Karen.
Hi there. I don't know where to begin. I'm not a scientist. My search began when I had a very strange experience that I still don't know what it was, why it happened, and what caused it. It has to do with, my question for you has to do with natural phenomena and time travel or anything related to that. My experience was being in one place in one moment, and I don't know if there was a time loss or not, but I ended up in another place, about a quarter of a mile away, going a different direction. And I wouldn't be so sure about it, except that I was using a compass and a line sight.
You got lost. You said you wouldn't be so sure about it, but what?
I was going straight north. I was looking at a map. I knew I was trying to find something, a marker that I knew was straight north of me. And I was using a compass and a landmark, a line of sight, both to stay on track because I couldn't keep looking at the compass, but I could keep looking at that landmark while driving. And so I was going exactly north, and I ended up probably a quarter of a mile away. I've never measured it exactly. At a different point, at a different marker, an aluminum cap marker, going east. And there are two hills that you have to go down that only have cow path roads, where guys come looking for their cattle and then they wash out. Nothing you do without thinking, And I cannot explain this, so I've been, since that experience in 2010, trying to get information about what might explain what happened.
Just to clarify, you were going north and then you ended up going east?
I was looking for an aluminum cap going north on a piece of property, and because I knew it was directly north of me. And I spotted the aluminum cap. I got out, GPSed it, got back in my vehicle, went straight forward, and I was at the river's edge, which was directly east. So I was at a totally different point, going a totally different direction, having no memory of going down a hill and driving a quarter of a mile and changing my direction because I was looking for something very intently. So my question to you is,
go ahead.
You have any information about this, or what can I do to learn more about? And there's been other things about that area. I've taken my son's dog there. It's very strange with the energy there. I mean, he was just a basket case, and he's a very calm dog usually.
Is this in New Mexico?
So, this is in Utah.
In Utah? What part of Utah?
Southeastern.
Southeastern, okay. Sort of near the Four Corners?
Yeah, near enough.
All right. Well, I don't know exactly what happened, but there was a point in between point A when you knew you were headed north and point B when you saw that you were east and you recognized that this was anomalous.
Right.
There are two referential points, and then there's a point in between that you cannot account for.
Right.
And, you know, my immediate intuition would say if this was the old days or even the modern days, I'd want to put you on a biofeedback meter, which is when the Scientologists use an e-meter, and see how that reacts to you, you know, because you want to dig out what's there. You want to dig out any sort, and you can do this with muscle testing as well. You know, what did this happen? Did that happen? You've kind of got to go into your mind and ferret it out, much as if you were chasing a ferret in a house. You want to investigate it. Now, one technique that I've been taught in the Qigong practice that I do, and that I put into my book to put into the eternal memory as long as this book lasts, is an exercise called the dark room. It's delineated in my book, The White Bat, The Alchemy of Writing, where one goes into a completely dark room and does a series of exercises. And this is not really any different from ancient Tibetan cave meditation, where
Right.
you go into complete darkness and you begin to connect with the entirety, not only of yourself, but with the entirety of the universe. There's a connection there.
I've always heard that's about a 3-day process to really get attuned to the dark and basically have it take over your sensory perception.
I'm not recommending a 3-day process.
Right.
I'm recommending, 15 minutes a day,
Okay.
ideally 3 times a day, and in complete darkness. And this is an incredible process, because when I did it, I could completely reevaluate my whole life, and I could change my direction, go where I wanted to go. I'm not, personally seeking to dig out memories like you are. This is certainly a curious occurrence. And, what has influenced you, what did influence you? There's different ways to approach this. I mean, some people would use just straight out hypnotism or regression.
Right.
And
I've considered all of those. Yeah.
And it's basically, you have to go with your gut. You have to follow your intuition. And when people say go with your gut is actually where you formed, you created in around the navel area. And that's why they say go with your gut. You think with that area, and it will direct you to what you want to find out, what you want to discover. People are always seeking to find out things to reconcile. And I can only speak from personal experiences. I've gotten older, were certain situations or connections that I wanted to reconcile, and some of them were quite innocuous. And then you just realize, for me, I'm not talking for you, God, I could just let them go, because I'm in the here and now, and I have the future. In an experience like yours, I don't know that I would be so quick to let go of it.
Well, and here's another point, is that this is actually land that I own, that I can go back, and if there's some advantage or purpose in my re-experiencing something, I'd like to know that. I guess part of what I'm trying to do is discern whether it's something I should consider approaching again. I've kind of avoided that area. I've had other experiences out there. This may be part of what, part of my purpose, I guess. And so...
Go ahead.
But I'm a little apprehensive to go through the experience again and come out on the other end of it, so to speak, like I did on the first time, without any further information or knowledge, and just to say, well, shoot, I'll go, maybe this is a portal, I'll just go ahead and try to walk through it again and, end up in Turkey or something, This is my concern. But
we've got areas like this.
Drawn to it.
We've got areas like this in New York, and people have had negative experiences. I know there's certain areas where compasses go wacky, and I've been in at least one of them in Romania, and it's, experiences did happen there for people, not like you had, but you could see the energy, what happened. And I'm the type of person that's not eager to go into areas where I do not belong. And if I belong, I was always quick to go out to Montauk because I was investigating it and I felt like I belonged there. I've never been even desirous of going to Egypt, where there's all sorts of negative things happen to people that go to Egypt. And I'm not saying everybody does, but you go where you're supposed to go. And this is a law of life that I follow. And there might be times when you should go there. There might be times when you should not go there. I can't answer these for you, but you can basically answer them for yourselves. And, you have to align your purpose in life, state your purpose in life out loud, if only to yourself. And what do I want to go here for? What do I want to resolve? List out your purposes and objectives and follow those. And if your objective is not to have something negative happen to you, and you don't go there, well, then you've succeeded, by avoiding it.
Right.
And also, going with witnesses is not a bad idea either, because it's all comes down to grounding. This is another thing all of my adventures in over 2 decades led me to the practice of Qigong, with a Qigong master that I work with in Brooklyn, Roosevelt Gainey. And I'm a pretty grounded individual anyway, but the grounding is very important for anybody that deals with otherworldly phenomena, psychic phenomena, healing phenomena, ground, because it ties you to the earth. Some people do not want to be tied to the earth. And this is sometimes a great danger to them because they ended up...
We are not helium balloons.
Well, yeah, I mean...
We can be, but yeah.
Well, exactly. And you can ask yourself questions. You can write down these questions just as you can write your objectives. What do I want to know about this? And you make the questions as easy to answer as possible. You don't ask the impossible questions, and you just keep writing these until you exhaust the curiosity. But interest is something that we're supposed to follow. We're supposed to follow what we're interested in life, and why does it seek our interest? This is how we find things out. So life is a discovery process, and you are in the process of discovering, and it's adventurous, it's risky, and it's up to you to make the decisions.
If it's a natural phenomena, are there a couple of technical tools that could help me understand it is a natural phenomena? Maybe natural in the sense of natural, but not necessarily well known by people in general.
Well, yeah, you can test this with muscle testing. Muscle testing, You can look up on the internet how muscle testing is done.
I understand how to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just do that, and this will answer your questions. You just find somebody that you trust and is good at it, and start asking. This is like asking yourself: Is this good? Right. Should I follow it? And you just use that to answer your questions. See, the answers are always within us. It's just that we can get distracted by the blinking lights.
Right. We're really good at diverting our own attention.
Yeah, you're welcome to write to me at petermoon333@gmail.com.
Okay. I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, and you check my website. You can, if you lose the email, you can find me through that.
Okay. All right. Yeah, this is just the tip of the iceberg, but I had to come up with something succinct enough to ask you.
I was curious with you, if you were in New Mexico, you're not far from New Mexico. David Anderson's research lab is in northwestern New Mexico.
Really?
Yes, and I don't know exactly where it is,
Mm-hmm. I noticed the website does not reveal that.
No, and it's
I
probably
go knocking on his door.
It's probably not far from Chaco Canyon, I would assume.
Okay.
But I've had two of my psychic friends out there. One of them who is specifically interested in time travel, specifically interested in assisting me. And in both cases, when they were out there in that very area, I was trying to get them to go poke around and see if they could find it. And boy, they let me put it this way. It was like I was telling them to go into. They were both females. It was like I was telling them to go, go to the men's bathroom. Take your next, bathroom event in a men's bathroom. Well, no, they're not going to do that. And
right.
And I might as well have said that to them because there was no response. And in one of the cases, the one who was specifically interested in time travel, she says, "Oh no, can't do it. Not going to do it." And
well, it's probably protected, don't you think? It's been psychically protected, and I mean, I've had in exploring this own property, I've had some very good psychics, and one basically ran into armed guard, quote unquote, that wouldn't let her look, and said, "You don't belong here," and she very respectfully said, "Okay, I'm backing off."
Well, yes, but by the same token, when I last spoke to David, I had asked him. He said to me, he says, "I'd really like you to meet some of these people in the lab. We could go out to dinner sometime." And I'm thinking, like, no, David, I want to go to the lab. I don't want to go out to dinner with these people. and I later asked him about that. Pardon?
I want to work for the guy.
Well,
I want to work for him.
I said, a lot of people would. And I said, well, would it be possible for me to see the lab? He says, that's no problem. It can be arranged. And I said, there's no security problem. He said, no. Now, what that means is that surprised me because I'd never asked him before. And this would be the lab in India, which is the biggest. And the thing about it is it's going to have to be timing when he's ready to do it and when the universe is ready. In other words, when the guards will disappear, the guardians, the jinn, whatever you want to call them, will disappear when it's time to do something. Time becomes, here again, we're dealing with time. So I will go when I'm meant to go. The most heartening aspect of it for me personally is that before I went to Romania the first time, I had a dream where there were tapes that had the secrets of time travel, and they were erased. And I went up, they were erased. I said, oh, my God. And, of course, what eventually happened was, here it is years later, and those secrets are no longer secrets. So, in other words, it took 7 years or whatever it took, but now these things are, published in the form of videos. So, in other words, progress is made. You can find out the answers to these things. How long it will take you, I don't know, but you can find out, and you can start with a muscle testing, and that might do you a whole lot of better than even consulting psychics and whatnot, because you're consulting your own self. Not that they can't help you.
And they're probably consulting me anyway, so right back.
Yeah, but I welcome you to try that, and as I say, you're welcome.
All right.
To write that, and I will, push you in the direction of the dark room if you want by email, because I've had some remarkable occurrences with the dark room. It's too complicated to go in, but when people start doing it where they end up in sacred spots and whatnot, I think you'd find it very beneficial.
Well, interestingly, there are some caves, and I've been in these caves. They're fairly treacherous in the sense that one entrance caved in, but when you're in far enough, it's complete dark.
What caves
and
are
I'm
these?
very on the same property.
In Utah?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And it's very dark, and I'm very, very comfortable in there. My biggest concern would be, animals or whatever being in there more than anything, But I could spend time in there, and I don't know, it's a comfortable feeling for me, dark and closeness like that.
Well, I will say one thing to you. Intuition-wise, it's always been I guess, like say, I don't want to go to Egypt. It's always been a desire of me to go to the Four Corners. I've never had the time or the opportunity. And I don't know that I'll have the time or the opportunity soon. My next destination is Transylvania in, Romania in July, the end of July. But I'm saying is, I've always wanted to go to the Four Corners. Someday I probably will. And, it's like you're kind of throwing out an anchor there.
Right. And I kind of, the way I look at this property, it's like a spiritual Disneyland. Now, I don't know if that's just for me, but I think, and I have thought ever since I became the owner of it, that it was meant for other people as well, in a very simplistic way, not in a developmental way. I'm talking about maybe teepees and yurts at best, or bring your own tent. But I think it's a spiritual Disneyland.
Well, I'm sure it is, and I would also look into the Indian lore of the area, the Indian lore that you can find in the library, and I would also seek out the native peoples who could tell you something about it. That there will be certain natives that can speak for that area.
Right.
And you might also find if the Mormons have any history on that area, because the Mormons carry certainly a dubious legacy, but they hone in on specific spots, for better or for worse.
I inherited this property because it was in my husband's family, and when he died, we were joint tenants, and it became mine. His grandfather wrote 800 pages and put it in the state archives.
On the property?
I made a trip on the area.
Oh, there you go.
Over a specific topic, which I went up to the archives and copied all 800 pages on a very old machine. So
I personally don't know much about Southeast Utah. I know a little bit about when you get a little further north into Utah, and I don't claim to know a lot because I've done a few articles on the Mormons and the Indian connection there. But I don't know you said southeastern Utah. I just am ignorant on that area, but certainly, and I don't know. It's certainly interesting. I mean, there were the Ute Indians, and the Ute Indians, I believe, came from Mexico. And there's a whole tie-in to the tribes that rose northern from the general Mexico City area.
Right.
Pre-Aztec.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. I can't absorb the information fast enough for my pleasure and enjoyment and just in awe of it. My most recent experience was getting a book called The Pueblo Revolt, and I went into this used bookstore in Durango, Colorado, and I walked in. I'd never been in this place before. Walked in, turned around the corner, hung another left, was staring at this bookshelf, and it was right there in front of me. And I had been wanting to find more information to research about the area, and so it does go into the area some.
It just reminds me of a lady I know who was a Pueblo Indian, and she might have some data on the area as well. I don't know. She's a native, and interesting.
It has a rich history that way, that's for sure. It's an area that has a lot of history, and I'll tell you more. But
well, this is a great great connection, and Andrew, I have to thank you. It's for letting the conversation flow. It's been a great. I hope it's been as interesting you and your audience as it has been to us two.
Oh, certainly. I enjoyed listening to that whole entire experience. Makes me kind of jealous about why I haven't experienced such alterations in time, not realizing what happened. I mean, I sure felt like a timeline shift happened during this recent solar eclipse earlier this month. I felt some energies there, but no major how did 2 hours pass when it only felt like 5 minutes or something? No, I haven't really had anything like that. But I have no doubt your story is genuine, and so are countless other witnesses who say this. Don't let anyone tell you you're crazy. You believe what you believe. You have a right to believe it. And, well, I hope you wish you future luck in getting some answers, by all means.
Thanks. I'm actually hoping to move back to the area so I can spend a lot of time there.
Good luck.
More.
Best of luck.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Peter, for your time. I appreciate all that time.
Thank you, and I'll hear from you.
Thank you. Take care now. Later.
All right. Thanks.
All right. We have a question in the chat room here. Is future remote, this is from Soul 11, by the way, is future remote time viewing being done by the governments, military, and Illuminati, and is the future being changed by remote time influencing? Can you answer that?
Well, I can't really answer that in all due honesty because I could tell you that certainly people are always attempting to change the future. And just as a football team will do everything to win the football game, including spying on their rivals and then acting disgusted when somebody gets caught spying on their rivals. You're planning to win a game. Yes, the military will do everything it can, including black magic and including remote viewing. And if it works, it works. They'll try it some more. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I think that, how well it works, gosh. But they will, I would say, yeah, definitely they will try anything. And they will also give up on it if it doesn't work. It's the best I can answer his question for.
Well, so 11, I do hope that satisfies you. I think you gave a great answer to the best of your ability. All right, just so you know, we have 16 minutes left on the live feed. Probably give this show just 2 hours. If you need a little bit past 2 hours to finish a thought or statement or something, okay, but people would have to call in to listen to that. But last thing I have here in the bio, in regards to the Transylvania series, it says investigate other space-time projects as discussed in the series, one of which includes what has been called the most amazing archaeological artifact in the history of mankind, a chamber that contains a holographic record of the Earth's history as well as holographic readouts of human DNA and other species. Could you elaborate on what that's all about?
Well, this is a very exciting aspect of my adventures. And this concerns a manuscript. When I was first going to Romania, before I went there, I had my book, The Montauk Project, was translated into the Romanian language. And my publisher over there sent me a book. He says, well, do you want to publish this book in English? It took me 4 years before I got down to reading it, and it was a book about what you just said. It was about, there's a sphinx in Romania, and beneath this sphinx there was a chamber discovered, and it occurred with the 2003 biorhythm of the Montauk Project, the Philadelphia experiments, every 20 years, the anniversary of those experiments, August of 43, August 63 was a project on Long Island called the ITT, Brentwood Project. The 83 was the Montauk Project. We were all waiting for what project would be in 2003, and then little did we know there would be a discovery in Romania of this chamber that was discovered through ground-penetrating radar through the Pentagon. And this chamber showed that there was an area that they couldn't penetrate. So there was a whole big secret project that was coordinated with Italian Freemasonry, with Freemasons in the Pentagon, and then with the secret department of Romania is called Department Zero, where they, behind the backs of the American president and the Romanian president, they penetrated this chamber with American technology and Romanian territoriality because they own the land. So there was, and the Freemason was trying to get his mitts in there, but he kind of got kicked out because he was evil. But in any case, it's all in this book, Transylvania Sunrise, which is available at skybooks.usa.com. I've also lectured on it on other YouTube videos. But basically, they discovered a chamber, and this chamber had tables that were like 6 feet off the ground. So, it's giants. There are also a lot of giant skeletons that have been found in Romania. Now, when you put your hand over a part of this table, it would read out the configuration of a species, and it would in holographic form, and it would show in holographic form the star system that it came from. If you put your hand over another part, it would show another species with another star system. And if you put your hands over both of them simultaneously, it would show a hybridization of these two life forms. So you had here a concept of Noah's Ark. You have a concept in here that supersedes the Hall of Records described by Edgar Cayce to be found underneath the Sphinx. It supersedes the story of Noah's Ark because this is all much more highly evolved thinking, repositories of knowledge. If it's not true, it gets an A+ for the science fiction aspect of it. However, this chamber also contained what was called a projection hall, whereby you could go in and you would get a video representation of the history of the Earth. You would see it in holographic format, not video format, a video holography, and it cut off around 400 or 500 AD. But you could go back and see the history of the world. And the author, Radu Sinamar, saw the history of the world, but it was, summarized in about 45 minutes, an hour, where he was able to see his own version. And everybody who would go in, all of the features in this chamber are bioresonant. So in other words, you would see a different history than I would see, than X person on the street would see. So also in this complex, and the whole story of how it was discovered and the politics behind it are in the book Transylvania Sunrise. All of these, and then there were 3 tunnels beyond the projection chamber, or in the projection hall it's called, and one chamber went to a similar installation in Iraq, and then extended on to and branched off to a similar installation in China and one in Mongolia, not China, Tibet. There was another tunnel that would go beneath the Giza Plateau where there was a similar installation with basically a time viewing chamber where you could view into time, but you couldn't travel into it. The mother chamber was in Romania. And then there was a third tunnel, which was the most mysterious of all, which went into the inner earth. And through my own adventures in Romania, I've pretty much figured out where that inner earth tunnel went. It could have gone to all areas in the inner earth, but it went into a specific area, according to my estimation, into Transylvania. The Sphinx is not in Transylvania. It's on the border between Wallachia and Transylvania. It's more in Wallachia, which is the province to the south and southeast, which is where the famous Vlad Tepes, or Count Dracula, was from. He was the ruler of Wallachia, not Transylvania. But into Transylvania is a huge repository of gold and the ancient Dacian Empire, and that's the most intriguing area of all to me. But in which I will adventure to. I've made different adventures there in the past. Even met my wife there, and I have a Romanian wife now as of a little over a year. And so it was a highly charged environment and place for me. But so that's a little bit about that chamber. It's very exciting. It's a very interesting book, and there's 4 sequels to the Transylvania. This is the Transylvania series. It's Transylvania Sunrise, Transylvania Moonrise, Mystery of Egypt, which explores that tunnel to Egypt. Secret Parchment is the one that goes into the mysteries in Transylvania, and the 5th book is The White Bat, The Alchemy of Writing, where I summarize a lot of the adventures and experiences I've had. It also includes the patent for the time reactor. So that's a little overview of what I've done or what's going on in the incredible country of Romania.
Thank you. Just something here in the chat room. Corrine said hello because says this was a great book, The Transylvania Sunrise. So hope you enjoyed hearing that. So
if it's my friend Corrine, I don't know that it's my friend Corrine DeWinter, but anyway, thank you, Corrine.
Okay, and we got just over 8 minutes left on the live feed. Something here from your website to finish the show on. The John Ford UFO case. You must think it's significant if you put something as one of the top icons here to click on for your website, digitalmontauk.com. So what's that all about?
We have a monthly radio show on the John Ford case on Inception Radio, hosted by Bob Tarmac, and this is somebody who was imprisoned in 1997, I believe it was, and he never got a trial. He was the founder of the Long Island UFO Network, and he was put into the Mid-Hudson Forensic Hospital for the criminally insane, and he's stuck there. And the person, it was all supposedly because he was accused of conspiring to put radium in the toothpaste of John Powell, who was like the most powerful Republican in Suffolk County. John Powell was subsequently arrested for running a chop shop and allowing illegal dumping in Brookhaven town. He was put in prison. He was a convicted felon, even though he was the most prestigious or most powerful Republican in Suffolk County, if not New York State. And it was all politically motivated to put John Ford in jail, and he was a court officer without any criminal record, and so this is a case of outrageous injustice, and we try to talk about it and do something about it every month. Bob Tarmac is trying to raise not only national but international attention and outrage on this case. You can go read his statement to the press on the website, which is in PDF form. This is a very long story, and it's an American tragedy. And I didn't really know John until this happened. I met him one time, and I wrote a lot about him in my newsletter. I do a quarterly newsletter called the Montauk Pulse, and it's available by subscription. You can find the subscription at skybooks.usa.com. That's a little bit about the John Ford case, and I encourage anybody to get interested and contribute to the cause in any way, shape, or form.
Thank you very much. All right, quick question I want to ask about the manipulation of Watergate, of all the subjects to discuss. Andrew Basiago says that, well, Watergate was, and he's not the only one, that Watergate was manipulated. The whole breaking into the building to recording devices, that was everyday practice for a president. So no shock Richard Nixon would do that, but they manipulated that in order to get him impeached or make him resign before he got impeached, was what happened. And the reason they manipulated that was because he was going to blow the whistle on UFO and, as Andrew Basiago claims, time travel technology. Do you think there might be some truth to that idea?
I have no idea, but one thing that's underappreciated in the Watergate scenario is Playboy magazine did a couple of articles on the Howard Hughes connection to covering up the Howard Hughes connection to the government and the Watergate scandal. I don't remember the specifics, but I've read the article a couple of times. And you might find at least part 1 or part 2 of it in if you look up on the internet, Playboy magazine. Howard Hughes, Watergate, you might find the article. Howard Hughes was involved. He dug the tunnels at Montauk because he had the drill. Howard Hughes was involved with a time portal, to the best of my knowledge, with a man named Otto Rahn, a famous SS officer who was very famous he was seeking the Holy Grail and the Ark of the Covenant. He was apparently friends with this man, this Nazi, in the 30s, and they used to go to a place in Girona, Spain. where there's a big portal near there, a lot of negative energy. And so, the potential for time is there. I'm not going to say it's not, because all of these conspiracies are often multi-layered. I have no specific knowledge of the time angle on that, but certainly there was more to Watergate than meets the obvious eye.
No question. And, well, there's only a few minutes left on the live feed, so I guess might as well end the transmission at this point, and I'll do that by telling you what is the most emotional part of every single show, the end part, because I tell all my guests this, and kind of emotional to tell them this, but I loved having you on. You're a fascinating individual. I promise to spread this video far and wide, uploading it to YouTube and uploading links to it on some social networks and such. And Peter, if you've ever need some sort of a medium to get information out, like you want a radio medium, by all means give me a buzz and I can give you like a half an hour to an hour special to discuss whatever it is you want to talk about. But as far as me contacting you or any of my previous guests goes, ever since I started doing this show, I've always had feeling that the best way to do this show, the most impartial, most informative, and fairest way to do this show is to try to get as many different guests on the show as possible before giving any one specific guest double dip. So that does mean I probably won't be asking you to come on the show again, but that's only because I need to give thousands of other individuals the chance to have some glory on my show who are worthy of having that glory. So loved having you on. I promise to do my part to get this info out. And I do hope your site becomes a lot more popular in terms of looking it up and URL searches after this interview gets out there.
Well, thank you. It sounds like you're providing a great service to the community.
That's what I intend to do till the day I die. Even after the powers that be are taken care of, you still want to try to spread love to the best of your ability, make things better. So I move closer to source, I say. So,
well, thank you very much, Andrew. It was great. It was great to get that. The contact with Karen was worth the time spent alone.
Yeah, and that was Corrine that in the chat, by the way. So supernatural.
Oh, great!
Radio.
Wonderful.
Answer that question for you.
You should have her on, Corrine DeWinter, the great poet.
Okay. Well, Corrine, you heard that. Get back to me sometime, maybe in the chat room before you leave, before I end the show and the transmission, and maybe we'll talk about why you are a worthy guest to be on my show. And
she's an award-winning author. She won the Bram Stoker Award, and she has her own radio show. She does a lot of talking to the other side with her guest talk. I don't know that she talks to the other side.
She's
another
radio
of
show. Okay, well, anybody who has another radio show is definitely worthy of being a guest, because with all the people we listen to, we could potentially be the best guests for radio shows, other radio show hosts, I say. So that's something to consider. Thank you very much for letting me clear on that, and I wish you the best of luck, Peter. Take care now.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Bye. All right, folks, that's the end of this show. And Darcy Hotchkiss, who was a speaker at the N5D Deactivation Conference that I was recently at, will be the guest on the show. I'll be talking to her this Saturday. So Darcy Hotchkiss, guest on the show. She is a pure bioenergy therapist, among other things. Tune in next week, next Wednesday. This is Andrew Fisher signing off from Nature of Reality Radio. Enjoy the rest of your trek through infinite consciousness.